Good day to you, Mani. Welcome to the Iowa channel. Nice to have you back here.
Good day, Abhi. Thank you again for having me.
Namaste to you. Welcome.
Namaste.
Okay, so what's your question for today?
So it's the question I have is a build up on the previous podcast. You make mention of the true self and the ego self, and how one has to dissolve the ego self. But what is the ego self?
Okay.
Is it an identity? Is it tied up to experiences? What is it? What is the ego
Okay.
self?
Thank you for such a question. This will be, I think, one of the most important questions that you've ever asked. So, hello, dear listeners. I think this is something that you've got to keep on your playlist. What is the ego? What is the ego self? Where you put your mind, that becomes a reality. Whatever you focus on is already taking shape in the astral dimension as spirit, which then comes down into material dimension and becomes a reality in matter. So what I'm saying is, where you put your mind, you are creating things. It might not be in the material form as yet, but it is already in the astral form. The fact that you are thinking of something, it's already happening in the astral dimension. We'll save the dimension of astral dimension on the topic of on another podcast. But for this podcast, based on the question, what is the ego? An ego, an ego or ego is that which is of far away from the truth. Anything that is far away from the light, anything that is far away from righteousness, everything that is far away from truth is the ego. And that such a person or individuals or collective consciousness, when it starts to defend that which is far away from the light or truth or nature's law, for some kind of reward, for some kind of reward, is ego. The ego is not the true self. The ego is the false self. The ego is not the true identity. But a lot of human beings are leading their lives with false identities. I'll give you a quick
Mm.
example. A man that has built such an empire, and you know, based on my podcast, whatever you talk of all the time, you become. So if a person that is so proud of such an achievement, and he starts to associate himself with that achievement, that I am a businessman, I am a multimillionaire, I am this and that. When that is taken away from him, such a person cannot function properly. Not because he
Mm.
has so much of a fear of economic uncertainties. He loses himself because he has attached himself to the outcome. I always say this: never attach yourself to the outcome of anything. That's the ego.
Mm.
Ego means attaching yourself to the outcome of anything. Why? Because you're focused on the outcome. And the true identity gets consumed by the grind and finding the
Mm.
beauty in it. And the ego is attached to the outcome of anything, whether it's pain, happiness, pleasure, whatever. Such a person is driven to do things based on the outcome. And the outcome is always self serving. In most cases, it's self serving. And the
Mm.
true self is never self serving. The true self is serving for nature. Nature means life. Life means all that is alive. And there's everything that's alive: the water, your trees, the plants, the animals, they all have different parts of life to it. So, what is the ego? The ego is limiting beliefs. The ego is less knowing, standing up for something without. How can you stand up for something which you know not of? That's the ego. How can you stand for, in inverted commas, the truth when whatever you know is a belief and not a knowing? So, a belief is the ego, a knowing is far away from ego. A knowing is the truth. A belief is ego. So whoever believes in something, based on my awareness, Bobby, whoever believes in something is an egoistical person. Such a person has the belief that such a thing exists. But a person who knows, how can you unknow what you know? I don't believe I have 2 thumbs and 8 fingers. I know it. So a knowing is the truth. And something which is a belief is neither true or not. You just believe it. And what you believe is true, you can, and if you climb to the highest mountain and you may scream it off, and if you gain a large following base to follow such practices without it being a knowing, and you defend it from a point as you know, yet it's a belief, then that's the ego. The ego is everything that is not the truth. And the ego is a low vibrational dimension. It comes from the low vibrational dimension of existence. It's one of the consequences, or it is sometimes the root for taking you down to the lower dimensions of reality. I hope that answers your question. I think in the next podcast, it'll be very, very important to do one on how to dissolve the ego. Jai Shri Ram, namaste to you.
Yeah.
God bless you, and thank you for the question.
Thank you, Abhi. Jai Shri Ram.
Goodbye. Jai Shri Ram. Bye bye.